So do you keep your backstrap in whole chunks, or do you cut individual steaks before you cook it?
Never, ever cut it into steaks before you cook it. That's what I did growing up. I'd cut butterfly steaks. It was a mistake. I didn't know any better. You leave it into whole chunks and you cook it like that, and then you slice it before you serve it.
100%.
This is the only way.
The best way.
I will fight people who think otherwise. These are stories of outdoor adventure and expert advice from folks with calloused hands. I'm James Nash, and this is the Six Ranch Podcast. In the United States, there are about 15.2 million hunters. That's how many hunting licenses we sell in the country. And they spend around $21 billion per year, which breaks down to an average of $2,800 per hunter. Now, we need to be really smart about how we spend that money. You can't spend it on stuff that's going to break. Otherwise, you have to buy something else again, and you end up costing yourself even more. We also need to be smart about how much weight we carry in our packs, because that's a serious limiting factor. One way to remove about 5 pounds out of your pack without sacrificing your ability to find animals is to get rid of your spotting scope and tripod. Now, there's a time and a place for those things, and I carry both of them a lot. But if I need to go lightweight, I'm going to carry stabilized binoculars. And the best stabilized binoculars I have ever used are from Sig Sauer. They are the Zulu 6, and they just came out with a new pair called the Zulu 6 HDX. I use the 12 power magnification model. They weigh 21.5 ounces, and they have 2 modes of stabilization. So you throw the lever forward once, and that's going to stabilize the image. If you turn it off and turn it back on again, that's going to stabilize it even more. And I'm not kidding. It is more stable than if you're glassing from a tripod. It is absolutely incredible. You're going to be able to see stuff at just incredible distances and really break it down. Like, you're going to be able to tell the difference between a Billy and a Nanny mountain goat at a mile. You're going to be able to actually see if there's a kicker coming off that 4x4 muley that just popped up over the hill. They work great at early and last light. They work great at highlight. They fit really well in my hands. Like, this was one of the first products that I asked Sig to make when I started working with them. And to no surprise, they were already on it. They were way ahead of me. But this is a really good piece of gear. I highly encourage you look into it. You can go to sigsauer.com, look for the Zulu 6 HDX. Comes in a few different magnification settings, but the one that I like the best is the 12 power. Check it out. What's the biggest amount of time you've spent in the backcountry by yourself?
By myself, 3 nights.
Are you too cold in here?
No, I'm good.
All right. I've got it kind of chilled down for my salamis right now. We've got salamis hanging from the ceiling. 3 nights. How many miles did you put on?
That one was pretty short. It was only about 6 miles, but it was a lot of elevation gain.
Okay. What's the most time you think you could spend in the backcountry by yourself?
I think I could do 10 days.
Yeah. It's tough to pack that much food.
It is.
It takes, and not even just the weight of it, but the space of that food is really cumbersome.
Yeah, definitely. I've gotten to making my own backcountry meals, dehydrating them, and it takes up a little less space.
Yep.
But I can get about a week's worth in my pack.
Yeah. So we've got Mr. Kevin Plew back with us. You remember Kevin from his first podcast, where he talked about how to get attacked by a bear and survive. For the folks that missed that one, let's talk through it one more time. What was going on that morning?
So that would have been almost a year ago now.
Mm-hmm.
That was first elk season, and it was a snowy day, a little bit of snow on the ground, and I was guiding a client for a bull elk, and he had at this point had gotten tired and I sent him to meet up with my dad, who was helping guide as well. And we got up on a little bit of a ridge, and when I sent him back, I dropped off the ridge. I was going to go down and glass a canyon at a bull we had previously spotted. And I went down there, and I found what I believed to be a wolf den. If not, it was a coyote den. And I was just poking around, checking it out a little bit. And I heard something back to my left, and when I turned to the left, there was a bear 25, 30 yards away on its hind legs, and black bears don't usually get me too particularly nervous, but I respect them and told it to get, and it just pretty much gave me the look I'd never seen before. And I pulled out my gun and told it to get again, and it wouldn't, and loaded it, and it kind of postured weird and hit the ground, and it took like 3 steps and stopped. And when it took those 3 steps, I'd put the gun up and I shot the ground in front of it, thinking that it might deter it. And at that point, it just came, and I shot a total of 7 rounds. No clue how many times I hit it at that point, but I would say safe bet would be that I hit it 4 times. And in between the 6th and 7th shot, it knocked me on the ground, at that point landing on my ribs and my right leg, and sprained my ankle. And when I shot it the last time, it ripped my jacket with its paw when it took off to leave. And when I stood up and ran away, I didn't even realize it at the time, but my hat had been missing where it had took my hat off my head. Me and my dad went back and found the hat later. There was still slobber marks on it.
Yeah. Yeah, there's slobber and bear blood on your jacket, too.
Yep.
I remember that jacket being torn up, and Cryptech stepped up and sent you a new jacket to replace that one. I think that's pretty cool. So, if you're a young man and you're guiding and you defend your life against a bear, and he tears up your jacket, let the folks at Cryptech know, and they'll probably hook you up. Yeah, man, that's a wild deal. Did you have any like stress after that? Was there any PTSD that came from it, or do you get nervous in certain scenarios more now than you would have before?
There's kind of a weird feeling of accomplishment.
Mm-hmm.
Like my whole life, being out in the woods, you kind of sit there and dream about that situation my whole life. Not that I want it to happen, but what I would do in that situation. So that was kind of like I did my job and lived through it.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's definitely been a little bit more jumpy to the gun when I see bears now. There's not going to be warning shots in the future.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of warning shots. People don't give black bears enough respect, I think, universally. And oftentimes they are just a 200-pound raccoon. But there are times that they're a very capable killing machine, and that's what they decide to do. It doesn't hurt you at all to show black bears a little bit more respect than what most people do. So how many years have you been guiding now?
Since I was 14, and I'm 19 now, so
5 years.
5
Your
years.
fifth season.
Yeah.
Do you think that there's a future in it for you? How long do you plan on doing this? I mean, you're 19 years old. You just graduated high school. Like, what's the future hold for Kevin Plew?
Definitely want to keep guiding in the center of my future. It's my passion. It's what I've basically known my whole life, and I love it.
What about outfitting?
Definitely.
Because they're different things, man. Guiding and outfitting are different. It's sort of like cowboying and ranching.
Yeah. So definitely my dad does more of that role right now. He sets up all the dates and all that, and he doesn't get enough credit for that. There's a lot of work that goes into that, countless hours on the phone with all sorts of different people. But definitely would like to expand the operation to more properties than we have right now.
Yeah. So outfitting is something that you'd like to see yourself transitioning towards?
Yeah, I would think that would be a good way to go.
What's your favorite thing about guiding?
First off, just love being in nature and like to provide people with an experience that they'll remember the rest of their lives.
Yeah. What's your least favorite part?
Dealing with people that don't appreciate it and don't want to put in the work.
Yeah. How much work is required? Because we talk about work in hunting a lot. And one of the things that drives me crazy is when people, they'll see an animal down or see a picture of that, and they'll be like, "No, the real work begins." Like, shut up, dude. First of all, it's not that hard, right? Like the field dressing, butchering, that kind of stuff, even like the pack outs. If that's the most work that you put into your hunt, then you probably got lucky, or you're hunting in a scenario where it's not that hard. If you're hunting in a tough scenario, you're going to put in way more work on the front end, like before that hunt even starts, than you ever will after the shot's been fired. Wouldn't you say so?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's weeks and months before season, you're out in the woods scouting, finding animals that you want to hunt in the future. Countless miles, and I mean, I spend every day I'm not in the woods on Google Earth and Onyx trying to find the spots that I want to check. I mean, the processing of an animal, to me, that's the fun part.
Yeah.
I mean, all of it's fun, but that's the reward. That's the easy part to a successful hunt.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting. So getting back to the question of work, if somebody doesn't know any of this and they're booking a hunt and they're listening right now and they're like, well, I wonder if I have what it takes to put in the amount of work required. How would you describe that? Like, what is your expectation of how much work a client needs to put in?
Well, as a guide, you kind of got to be a little bit flexible. I mean, it doesn't matter if I get in range of an elk, the client has to be there.
Mm-hmm.
I'd say archery hunt's the hardest physical, I can say, that I've guided, mostly because with a rifle you can shoot them from further away.
Yeah.
And I try to do around 10 to 20 miles a day when I'm guiding. And a lot of times, if a client can't do that, then we adjust and try not to do as many miles. The people that struggle the most come from sea level, from what I've noticed, and have an everyday job where they're not in the mountains very much.
Yeah.
And it's just the elevation gain gets them.
Yeah, the elevation is one thing for the first couple days, but you can acclimate to, we're just over 4,000 feet here. You can acclimate to that in a couple days. And yeah, the first couple days, you're going to be short of breath. You might have a headache. You're going to need to drink more water than what you normally do, things like that. But people will use that as an excuse for a lot longer into their hunt than they probably deserve to. 20 miles in a day is an awful lot. I don't ever travel that far while I'm archery hunting. I'll often put on 6 miles in the morning and another 5 or 6 in an evening, which again is a lot. But if you're moving 20 miles in a day, you're not doing a lot of hunting. You're doing a lot of moving around at that point,
Yeah, it just depends on the season to me. Second season, a lot of times, depending on what the client wants to kill, we're just trying to find tracks.
Yep.
So I'll walk all day finding tracks. Archery season, I'd say this year I think we averaged 12, 14 miles a day.
Yeah. Yeah. And, which, those are long days. What are some mistakes you see clients making that cause them problems when they show up for a hunt?
A lot of them is not bringing boots that are broken.
Yeah.
I see that. That's a big mistake. And then there's a lot of difference between shooting a target and shooting an animal. Mm-hmm. Picking a spot on an elk I see a lot of people rush their shots.
They shoot too soon.
Yeah.
And then what happens?
Poor shot placement or just clean misses.
Yeah.
And with rifles, that can be a little bit more, you can get away with it a little bit more, whereas with a bow, most of the time you get one shot.
Right. Yeah. What have you seen with shot angle? This has been a big one for me the last couple of years. And I think 3 years ago was when I first identified it as a like consistent problem where people were thinking that they were shooting broadside, but they weren't. So 2 years ago, I started like really harping on people to take broadside shots. It still wasn't happening. This year, I went like nuts with it, and I really, really spent a lot of time with every single hunter that came through talking about broadside, going out and shooting a 3D elk target at different angles, and showing them how much the angle changes just if you take one step to the right at 35 yards. It makes a massive difference. And talking about anatomy and physiology and the importance of getting both lungs and the medial sternum separating those two lungs and why we need to puncture that, and like really going down through the list. But it didn't change the outcome. Like we still had the same number of shots taken from bad angles, people that thought they were shooting broadside and they were really shooting a pretty steep quarter. I'm sort of at a loss, and I don't know how to explain it to people. So I'm going back to the drawing board on that. But what have you found with like shot angles?
Well, this year in two scenarios, one of them was me and bad judgment on what was broadside. It was a whitetail, actually. It was quartering. It was 14 yards, quartering towards a little bit. I thought it's not going to be a big deal. I can get both lungs, no problem. And I tucked it in right tight to the crease, halfway up the body. And I believe what happened was I was shooting a 3-blade broadhead. It glanced off the shoulder blade, and when the animal moved, I hit a little further back than what I thought, and I got liver and gut. And I thought it was going to go 50 yards, and it went about 400, and I found it, but
yeah,
not ideal. And then I had a archery elk hunter on a bull, and it came in and saw him, and it ran out a little bit further, but still in his effective range, and he thought it was broadside and shot and said I hit dead center in between the front shoulder and hind quarter. And I said, well, if it's liver, we need to give it six hours probably. And went up there 6 hours later, and the elk ran 30 yards and tipped over dead because it was quartering away when he thought it was broadside.
So the bull died right away?
Yeah, it died within 10 minutes of being shot.
Yeah.
As stiff as a board. Luckily, we didn't lose any meat. Even the tenderloins were good.
Yeah. That's very lucky, because if it was the other way, bad news.
Yeah.
Real bad news. No, the shot angle thing is really interesting, and I think if you get into the Midwest and the East Coast where guys are tree stand hunting deer, they're thinking about shot angle from another perspective, which is the verticality of it. Some of those guys hang really tall tree stands, and they're shooting really steep downhill into these deer, so they've got a whole nother side of it. Whereas the reality with elk is oftentimes you're shooting elk at the same level that you are. I don't see a lot of really steep shots on elk. Do you? For archery?
Not a whole lot. No.
Yeah.
Seems to be pretty much they come in at your level.
Yep. So if you're tree stand hunting elk, then there is that element, but elk tree stands, there's no need for them to be very tall. If they're 12 feet off the ground, that's more than sufficient. I've hung tree stands that are 6 feet off the ground, and they work great too. But elk have a pupil that doesn't allow them to see vertically. Did you know that?
No, I didn't.
Yeah. So they have to actually lift their head up in order to see uphill very far. So if you're in a tree right above them, their pupil is shaped differently from whitetails because they didn't evolve with any vertical attack predators. So it's just not an issue.
That's interesting.
You and your little squad have been able to find, some of the biggest mule deer bucks around. And, I'm really impressed with the amount of work you guys have put in to do that. 'Cause this is an area where mule deer are doing absolutely horribly, and there's very few of them left. Without talking about places at all, give me some advice on how to find big mule deer in places where there aren't very many deer.
Hours behind binos is all we do. Sit there and lots of scouting online, finding little spots. And the other thing, and especially in this unit particularly, is getting away from people. I had a season a few years back where I had an absolute giant buck scouted, and me and my good hunting partner Zane, we went in after it, and we were fairly positive we were going to be able to relocate it in season. And there's another group of guys in there that rode horses around in, not to offend anyone, but riding horses around without checking the wind for 10 hours a day really blows out a lot of deer. And we never saw a buck that whole trip. But I would say get away from people and just hours behind glass.
How do you get away from people?
Miles.
Yeah.
Walk miles. I find a lot less people when you break that 15-mile range.
15 miles is a long ways.
That's a long ways.
Yeah. And then when you're looking for stuff on, with your e-scouting, what are you looking for?
I like, a lot of people like the real big open slopes, the green slopes, which I've found deer in those, but I don't re-find them there in October. But I like to find scattered timber places. Burns are pretty good always. And I really like head basins. Like if there's a drainage, the very top basin, I usually find bucks in there.
Gotcha. And where do you find them again in October?
Sometimes right in the same spot. Sometimes they drop some elevation with bad weather or hot weather. It's kind of been weird the last 2 years. Opening day deer season's been the hottest day of the month.
Yeah. Tell me about your first cow elk.
First cow elk, that was a long time ago. But that was pretty cool. I remember I was hunting with my dad and my uncle. And we were hunting on the property I guide on now. And they got me shoot a cow elk when I was younger. And we set up a wall tent and had a camp. And I wanted to use a muzzleloader because, there's cow elk everywhere. So I kind of just figured let's make a little bit of a challenge out of it. I hunted, 5 days total. In the first 4, I used a muzzleloader, and my effective range was honestly about 75 yards with one at that point, and multiple elk at 100 yards. And by day number 5, I was ready to use a rifle. And me and my dad were walking down this pretty open ridge, glassing ahead of us. We knew there was some elk on it somewhere, and we found one calf elk alone. We figured there's probably some more around. It's middle of November. And we set up, and they're 250 yards. They fed out right in front of us. I didn't really feel comfortable with 250 yards. I was, 10 years old. So we snuck down and got about 180 yards. And it was the scraggliest, oldest, unhealthiest cow elk I've ever seen to this day. And I shot it 3 times. All 3 were in the vitals, and it died. And I could not have been more proud of that scraggly elk.
And then what happened?
That was before I knew how to take them apart very well. So me and my dad.
Didn't something happen when you stood up?
When I stood up?
Yeah, didn't you blow out a knee or something like that?
Yeah, that was right after my first knee was dislocated, and I popped it back in and went elk hunting. And when we were stalking it, it popped out. And
so you dislocated your knee while stalking, and that doesn't even make the story?
Well, it's kind of a common occurrence.
How many knee surgeries have you had?
7.
7 knee surgeries, and you're still trying to burn 15 miles one way into the wilderness.
Yeah, it has its issues, but I know I'm on a time limit before my knees can't hold up, so I want to do it while I can.
Okay, so, what's the future of that look like? Are you going to need knee replacements when you're 23 years old? Or?
I'm hoping to make it to 40.
Okay.
But I know I'm not going to let knee pain keep me from doing what I love.
Do you wear braces?
No, the doctor said it's not good to wear them. I don't know the specific reasons, but I think it makes the muscles around your knee weaker.
Okay. So what's your plan when you blow a knee out when you're 15 miles back?
Oh, funny you mentioned that. This last elk trip I went in. So I was planning, it was a 9-day backcountry trip, and we packed our food in with horses and walked in, and then picked up our food and packed another 4 or 5 miles back in and set up camp and then hunted out of camp. So I was back another 5 miles from camp. So at this point I was 16 or 17 miles. I was way too far in to be elk hunting, but got in on a pretty nice bull. And then on the hike out from that bull, it didn't work out. I slipped on the muddy trail because it had been raining all day. And I don't know if I fully dislocated it or partially, but it went in and went out and then went right back in. And I knew I wasn't going to be able to stay. So I went back, went to sleep, woke up the next morning, and it was super swollen and terribly painful. So I looked at my buddy and told him that I was going to have to go out and said, I'll leave you my tent and all this if you want to stay. So he stayed and I packed out, and I think it was about 13 miles out. And the first 4 were uphill. It wasn't too bad. I mean, one or two breaks and get to the top. And when I started downhill, it was just miserable the whole way. Just relying on trekking poles to keep the weight off of it.
Trekking poles are a lifesaver.
They are.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's irresponsible to go without them.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sorry that happened. That sucks. Was that Zane?
No, that was my buddy Luke Ramsden.
Oh.
We were all elk hunting together, and Zane went a different way for the day.
Gotcha. Yeah. I don't know. I think I'd have walked out with you. I'd be nervous to let you try and skip your way for 13 miles out of the backcountry.
Yeah, I have a Garmin inReach, so I text my dad every couple hours, make sure he knew where I was. And I have a buddy with horses that said he'd come get me if I needed, but I had too much pride for that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, pride cometh before the fall or something like that. I don't know. Tell me about your blacktail.
That was a pretty fun hunt. It opens August 19th, so it's an early season, full velvet, summer pattern. I'd never even been in this unit before, but one of my good friends over there, his dad hunts it all the time and with good success, and said I could go with him. So we were planning on going to a spot, got there, and a buddy he'd taken there like 6 years before went back to a spot. So we just picked a spot on a map that looked like it had some good terrain. And
let's talk about that real quick, because that is where do you land on that?
Be careful who you show your spots to.
Yeah. And if somebody shows you a spot, you cannot go back to that spot unless you ask them if it's okay. Like, that's the right thing to do. Would you agree with that?
That's typically the rule.
Yeah. When is that not the rule?
If someone plans on never hunting there again.
Okay. So if they say, I'm never coming back here again.
Yeah, or they move states away, or basically, for me, if someone isn't planning on actively hunting there at all, but I mean, there's multiple spots I didn't go to this year that I fully intend to again.
Yeah.
And there's a few buddies that know where they are, but they won't go there, and I know that.
Yeah. All right. So where I'm landing on this is, if I show somebody a spot, and let's say I can't even hunt it this year, I didn't draw the tag, they draw the tag. If the person that I showed that spot to calls me up and says, hey, I drew this tag, would it be cool if I went back to that spot that you showed me? I'm almost definitely going to be like, yeah, man, absolutely. Good luck. You need anything? Like, swing by the shop, grab whatever you need. However, if I go in there to go hunt it and that dude is parked there, it's like, I don't know if we're even friends anymore.
Yeah.
That feels really dishonest.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. So that's what happened here.
Yeah.
He showed the spot to somebody, and that person went back in there, probably brought somebody else with him. Like, this is how spots get ruined.
Yep.
Yep.
So at that point, we just picked a spot on the map a couple miles further in and hiked up there with no history of the area, never even been there before. And it was the night before season. We had glassed and turned up 3 pretty nice 4 points, so we were excited for the morning. Get up in the morning, and we can't find a deer. I think we'd seen 3 or 4 bears. There's more bears in that mountain range than anywhere I've been in my life. And middle of the day, I was like, well, let's go down this ridge and glass. It's not going to hurt anything. It's like 11:30. get down there. Within 30 seconds, I turn up a 3x4 that's a really nice blacktail, like 18 inches wide, good forks. It's about a 700 yards across this basin, and we watch it. And it beds in a spot where we can kind of tell where it beds, but not exactly, so not ideal with a bow. But I'm kind of the mindset you're never going to kill him if you don't try. So I was like, I'm going to go over there and see if I can get close to him. And he went with me for the first 400 yards of the stalk, but then I had 300 yards left, and I was knocking in on this buck, and it was pretty thick timber where I was. He had bedded in a little burn, so I knew where that was. And I just gotten to the point, I took my shoes off in the brush, be extra quiet. I ranged where I thought he was. It was about 75 to 100 yards. I was ready to go. And for some reason, I decided to look straight down the mountain. I looked straight down, and here 40 yards below me is this rack, and I can tell it's a pretty good buck. I'm not sure how big it was, but I wasn't being too picky. I'd never hunted a blacktail in my life, so I ranged it 41 yards. I knocked an arrow, dialed my sight. I have a slider sight, dialed it. Then I was like, I gotta get a little closer. It's bedded. So I sneak in 10 yards closer. Here it is 30 yards. I redial my sight. I'm like, all right, well, I can kind of see him, but I don't want to force a shot. You know, it's hard sometimes to make yourself do the ethical thing, but it's the right thing to do. Like, I can get 5 yards closer. 5 yards turns to 10 yards. Here it is, 18 yards. I draw back. It stands up perfectly broadside. Put it on the crease. The arrow, when that shot broke, it felt like the most perfect shot I've ever taken on an animal. And it just drops. And I left. Well, the only reason an animal, in my experience, drops with an arrow is if you hit him in the spine.
Yeah.
And get another arrow. At this point, he made it like 30 yards. Shot him again, and he went down. But I then looked down at my sight, and I never moved it from 32 yards to 18, which you wouldn't think makes a big difference, but that's 3 or 4 inches.
Mm-hmm.
I shoot really heavy elk arrows. So there's lots of drop, but
yeah. Good thing you were shooting heavy.
Yeah, I mean, I was shooting a four-blade broadhead. I shot him through both scapulas and the spinal cord passed through. And on the second one, I was shooting straight down. I shot through his spine and out his sternum.
Yeah. Yeah, 4 blades cut better than 3 blades, which is not what most people would think, but a 4 blade is only cutting in 2 directions, whereas a 3 blade is cutting in 3 directions. So I really detest 3 blade broadheads. I think that they're an embarrassment to geometry. It's also the monolithic ones that are tough enough to shoot elk are inherently dull because they're a 33-degree angle. Yeah. That's like a screwdriver. Knives are sharpened between 14 and 20 degrees most of the time. So the knife that you're going to go use to cut on that animal is almost twice as sharp as the broadhead that you're trying to use to kill it. It just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of 2 blades and 2 blades with bleeders. Those are definitely my go-to for elk.
Yeah.
Single bevel is important.
Yep, I agree. Makes a big difference. Penetration is what matters more than anything. Shot placement, shot angle, that comes first, right? But those are things that a guide has very little control over. Like the client's going to do the shooting. But what we can help them with is the equipment on the front end if they're willing to listen. And then if they do take that marginal shot and they've got the right broadhead and the right arrow, it can make the difference between whether you recover that elk or not.
Yeah, for sure.
What would you say are the percentages of elk shot versus elk recovered for archery?
Ooh, that's a tough one.
In your experience?
We've been pretty lucky. I think we've, in the last 2 years, only had one getaway.
Wow.
And it was shoulder blade.
Wow. That is lucky.
But the ranch we guide on, there's lots of opportunity, and we had one client that took a long shot this year, made a great shot, killed it. It was 70 yards, but
Yikes.
usually it's inside of 30.
Yeah.
It's right there, which doesn't mean it's going to be a good shot, but it definitely increases the odds.
Yeah. You know, in the last several years, I've seen more shots missed under 18 yards than over 18 yards. People are really bad about taking close shots, and they do goofy stuff like not look through their peep. You know, they just completely forget about their process. And I think it's just a big animal, and they're really excited, and they forget their process, and they're like, how could I possibly miss? And then they find that possibility.
Yep.
But the under 18 yard stuff is tough. And the same thing happens with rifle hunting. People miss a lot of really close shots with rifles, and it's not something that they almost ever practice. Like, when's the last time you practiced a 20-yard shot with your hunting rifle? Ever?
Never.
Yeah. But that's a realistic situation, right? You could be walking through the woods and have, something pop up right there, and you just have a second to swing over and take that shot. Be a good idea to practice it a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. Shooting a bow has got to be the same process every time.
Yeah. It's the only way it works.
Yeah. And when it's a lot harder when there's a screaming bull elk that's coming to more than likely try to fight you at 10, 15 yards.
Yeah.
It's intimidating, but you have to make yourself go through that same process, even if it's 5 yards.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And not even if they're just like coming in mad and screaming, like even if they're just coming in, like say you've got a tree stand up over water, those close shots are, they're hard to make. Psychologically, it's a challenge. But that gets into the mental side of shooting, which I just wrote an article about with mental management. But what's your mental process for managing a shot?
So I do everything the same, from the way I take the arrow out of the quiver to put it on the rest, knock it on the string every time. I have marks on my arrow that I make sure are on the upside, because my arrows are spine aligned, so make sure the spine's up every time. I don't know if it makes that big of a difference, but I'd rather it be the same every time. And then I draw my bow, and I come in from above the target always, every time. And that's a hard thing to make yourself do. But then I make sure to focus, and what I run through my head is stay in the shot. Don't drop out. Because as soon as you drop out, as soon as you punch that trigger, say close enough, you're going to miss. So I make sure I stay in the shot the whole time. Make sure that pin's floating where I want it. I want it to be floating through where I want it to shoot, not just passing through once. I want it to be consistent in that zone.
Okay. So talk to me more about pin floating.
So this is where the conversation of do you need a second stabilizer comes in. With a single stabilizer, you make a figure 8 on a target, or back and forth typically is how it is described. And your loops are fairly large. I run a second stabilizer now, and it makes so I can almost do like a U on the target. I can't hold it. You can never hold the bow steady, but
yeah.
What I want is, if I'm shooting at a dot, I want my pin to be in that dot the whole time before I let that shot break. Whereas when I was younger and first learning, which is fine, you got to learn somewhere, but I mean, the pin would cross the dot when I'd be coming in any given direction, and I just pull the trigger.
Mm-hmm. Which by the time you've gone through that shot breaking process, the pin and subsequently the arrow are past the dot.
Yeah.
Like it's really hard to shoot precisely like that. Do you find that adding pressure to the wall of your bow in your draw cycle helps shrink the size of the area that your pin is floating in?
Definitely.
Yeah.
And there's all sorts of different bow brands that do it with different back walls, but some are hard to hold back and some are pretty soft, but you have to push and pull through your whole shot.
You got a fancy bow for graduation, didn't you?
Yeah.
Yeah. Did you finally get that thing set up and working good?
Yeah, that's what I used on all my hunts this year.
Cool. What do you like about archery?
Getting close, and I mean, more than likely. I mean, there's people that pick up their bow 2 days before season and kill an elk, but to be consistently successful, I think you have to put in the effort. You have to shoot pretty much every day all summer and all winter, year round. The mental process, to me, it's kind of therapeutic to shoot a bow.
Mm-hmm.
Calms the mind down.
Yeah.
And I just like the challenge of trying to get close to an animal.
What's the closest you've shot something with a rifle?
75 yards, probably. Actually, I take it back. I shot a bear at like 10 yards.
Yeah. Well, you also shot a bear at like, 6 inches. But that was with a pistol, I guess. So
Yeah.
Different conversation. I often hear this because I ask everybody, do you like rifle? Do you like bow? If you like bow, why? Archery guys almost always say close, like they like to be close. And it's almost like there's something in their mind that says if you're using a rifle, you can't get close. You can. Like hunting close range with a rifle is so much fun. It is so cool. But a lot of people don't have the discipline to do it. They'll take that first opportunity that they get and they don't slip in there close. And it's pretty neat when you do. Like, it's really, really cool. Like that mountain goat, I was like 40 yards away from it, shot it with a rifle. Shooting archery distances with a rifle, I think, is more exciting than shooting with a bow.
Yeah.
And it's more lethal and more accurate.
Definitely.
Yeah. If I had the same hunting opportunities, I would probably only ever shoot a bow at targets and fish ever again. But a lot of these state game agencies think, okay, hunters are going to be less successful with archery than with rifle, so we're going to create more archery opportunities so that they can make more money for the state. So anytime that you're bow hunting, the state is betting against you, basically. And you're betting against the state as well. So they're going to win in the long run. The house is always going to win, but you're just trying to make it so that it's not you. And it's an interesting thing. I think deep into the future, it will be odd for people to look back and think that we had an archery-only season where we used bows with the most modern technology that you could conceivably slap together that looks nothing like what bows used to look like, and that we had specific areas and specific dates where you had to only use this modern version of an archaic piece of equipment. The crossbow was recently fired up because one of the Midwestern states allowed crossbow hunting for the first time during archery season. And like 40% of the users went to the crossbow. And I started asking people in the Midwest, like, hey, what do you think about this? Because crossbows are illegal in Oregon all the time. Like, you can't use one with a note from a doctor. You just can't use one. Doesn't matter if you're disabled. Like, if you're a veteran with one arm, like pound sand, you don't get to bow hunt. And I think that's crazy, I think that somebody hunting with a crossbow doesn't affect my experience of hunting with a compound or a recurve at all. Like, you go have fun. But people get really triggered by it. What I noticed, Kevin, is that a lot of the arguments that people were making against the crossbow were identical to the arguments that people made against the compound when the compound was first coming onto the scene. So what are your thoughts on crossbow hunting? Are you for? Are you against? Do you care? Would you like to see it in Oregon? Would you like to see it for people who are just disabled in Oregon?
I definitely think it's something that Oregon should consider. I mean, it would be great to see it come, in my opinion. There's a lot of people that love the experience of archery hunting that get to an age where they physically can't pull enough weight to kill an elk ethically. So They quit, or they have bad shoulders, torn rotator cuffs, or just people in general who can't use a bow. I think they should definitely be able to use a crossbow.
Yeah. I've used them on fish in North Carolina. I did some bow fishing with a crossbow. That was very fun. It was very fun. I've never hunted with one, but I'd kind of like to. You can bow hunt with them in Wyoming.
Really?
Yeah. I might be into that. Go do like a sure enough backcountry hunt with a crossbow.
That'd be pretty awesome.
That'd be kind of cool.
Yeah.
I mean, they're heavy, they're bulky. It wouldn't be any fun to carry around, but it'd be kind of neat to hunt bugling bulls with a crossbow. I'd be into that.
Definitely.
Yeah. Waterfowl season coming up.
Yep. I'm excited.
We're days away.
Yep.
We're a day away. It's tomorrow.
Unfortunately, not unfortunately, but I have deer hunters for the next 5 days. But
Same.
But
yeah.
I am going down to California for California's opener is the 21st and go wood duck hunting for a couple days.
Gotcha. I'll be guiding elk hunters then. I've got buck hunters until Tuesday, and yeah, if we've still got some ducks around in the middle of next week, I'm going to go shoot them a little bit. But this early season stuff is weird because like we've got our local birds, and they can leave like at any point. They can be gone, and then there's a little bit of a gap before the northern birds start showing up. So I don't know.
This valley to me is year to year.
Yeah.
I mean, there's years where I can hunt every weekend and get limits, and then there's years where you can get 1 or 2 limits a year if you hunt hard.
We had a good duck shoot last year.
Yeah, very good.
Yeah, that was fun.
That was an early snow.
It was snowy that day, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, it got cold early last year. That pond froze up. I didn't get to hunt it very much. I only got to hunt it a couple times. I ordered an ice eater this year. I had to bite the bullet on that. I think it was like $1,400 for a freaking ice eater.
That's expensive.
That is expensive. But if I can keep that pond open, I don't know, be kind of nice.
Yeah, especially when it comes December, January when it's real cold.
Yeah.
There's nowhere else in the valley. They go to the hot springs and the warm water ditches, and other than that.
Even November, like that pond froze during bull season because I was guiding Chesney bull hunters last year, and I was trying to get them to come duck hunt instead of elk hunting because I had so many ducks and I just wanted to go hunt them bad. And we ended up bull hunting instead. We got a couple bulls. It was all great. And then it froze up after that, and it stayed froze all year long. But my old lab, she's turning 10 this year, and like you kind of got to start thinking about like how many seasons you might have left at that point. So I want to be pretty conscious about making sure that I'm taking time to hunt with her this year.
Yeah.
She's retrieved so many birds for me and has been such a good friend, and she loves it a lot. And I need to make sure that I'm taking her hunting. She deserves it.
For sure. I remember my dog that I hunted with for years, his last year he couldn't hardly hear at all.
Yeah.
It was definitely difficult, but
yeah,
it's their favorite thing to do.
Yeah. And she kind of goes up and down on her hearing. We can do everything on hand signals, and that's all fine, but she's still got a lot of drive. She sits out here and she watches these ducks come in the evening, and she'll just like get the random shivers and whine a little bit. It's like, I know, it's almost time. It's almost time.
Your yellow lab hunt for you before then?
No, he's never been much of a hunter. So after Claire gets too old, I'm gonna need to get a puppy and start training it. And I've thought hard about whether there's another dog out there that can do it. And I think for ducks, like if you're being honest with yourself, lab is just the only choice.
Yeah, I switched up a little bit. I got a British lab.
Yeah, I like the British labs a lot. She's
definitely a lot more calm.
Yeah.
Not as near as rambunctious, but she is the smartest dog that everyone thinks their dog's the smartest, but she's the smartest dog that I've personally owned as far as her hand signals and her training is amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, I like the British labs. They've got a lot of personality too. A lot of times they're pretty goofy.
Yeah.
Is your dog like that at all?
Very goofy. She's a little bit more timid than I typically like in a hunting dog, but when you start throwing the dummies, she'll chase bumpers all day long.
Yeah.
Never get tired of it.
Yeah.
We're actually, this year, instead of flying to Arkansas to hunt, I'm going to drive because I don't trust the planes to travel with dogs anymore.
Yeah.
So we're going to drive all the way to Arkansas so she can hunt for a week.
Well, that'll be fun.
Yeah.
Are you going to hunt your way there?
Wasn't planning on it, but we'll see. Got a lot of good friends that live down there with amazing property.
Yeah. Well, hopefully you don't have to drive through Nebraska. Because I've had to drive through Nebraska when there's waterfowl in there, and it's like, oh my God. Just so many geese at times. But yeah, Arkansas has been a little bit hit and miss with ducks, hasn't it?
Yeah, last year was a weird year. I mean, again, we have private land to hunt, so it's always amazing. But
Yeah.
there's, on the refuges and stuff, it was very missed last year. The ducks were so congregated on a few properties. I mean, Arkansas is a big state in the area where it's right by Stuttgart, and there's just no one was killing ducks.
Some pretty talented callers in that area.
The best I've ever heard by far.
Yep. Yeah, I can't hold a candle to them.
No, they're pretty amazing, and usually it's the old farmers that are the best.
Yeah. Oh, really?
That I've noticed as far as they've just grown up doing it.
Yeah. Are those old timers down there using wood or acrylic?
The one who calls for us mostly, he uses wood. But he said he's had that call for 10 years.
Yeah. Yeah, I've got duck calls that are close to 20 years old now. I'm not good enough to use acrylics. I still like cocobolo and stuff like that. I like those real dense hardwood calls, but yeah, calling ducks is fun. Watching your dog work is fun.
Yeah, it's one of my favorites.
What do you have cool coming up in your life?
I got a whitetail hunt in Kentucky in December. I'm real excited about that.
In Kentucky?
Yep.
Nice.
So that'll be fun. I've never, around here, hunting whitetails a little different than what most people's experience seems to be.
And you said December?
Yeah.
So that'll be post-rut there?
Post-rut.
Post-rut.
Just hunting over food.
Cool.
Yeah. It's a muzzleloader season, but they said I could use a bow, so I'll probably use a bow.
Lame. Kentucky will let you use pretty modern muzzleloaders, won't they?
I'm not sure. Mine's the old-timey one with the...
Yeah. Yeah, Oregon does not.
No.
Yeah, doesn't play that game.
Neither does Colorado.
Yeah.
They're pretty...
Or are they pretty strict?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Me and Zane did a hunt there a few years ago and wake up every morning with dew on the ground and I wonder if my gun will go off.
Probably not.
Reload it every day.
Yeah. One of the guys, Cliff Gray, that I was guiding with this year, had a huge outfitting business in Colorado. And we were talking about the broadheads that we find in elk here. And about 1 out of 8 elk that I cut up has a broadhead in it that's been wounded previously by a bow hunter. And he said down there it was muzzleloaders. Like they just pulled muzzleloader balls and sabots out of these bulls like all the time. That they were really, really ineffective at killing those animals. And I mean, if they get wounded and survive it, I guess that's not the end of the world. But if you're finding that many, then gosh, how many of them are, getting punched in the guts and are dying and not getting recovered? It's a real source of frustration for me in these primitive weapon regulations. Is the reality is with archery, with muzzleloader, with all this stuff, you are going to have a lot more animals that get wounded and not recovered anytime you start regulating lethality.
For sure.
Yep. And that makes me sad. I don't want to see that. I don't want to see these animals getting wounded.
Not at all. I mean, there's also a lot of people stretch the capabilities of the weapons they have too much, in my opinion.
Yeah, and they do the same thing with rifle too.
For sure.
It's just that the rifle is naturally more lethal, but the reality is there is a judgment component to it. And people take shots that are too long with longbows, with recurves, with compounds, with crossbows, with muzzleloaders, with rifles, with the M1A1 Abrams main battle tank. Like, everybody takes shots that are too long if they don't have good mental discipline and enough training to understand what their limitations are.
Yeah.
Yep. So if you're gonna never miss again, you need to pay attention. Okay, question. What are your top 3 favorite wild game animals to eat?
To eat. All right, so I got to start. I don't know if it's really considered a wild game, but I'd say my favorite animal that it is wild where we hunt them, and that is buffalo by far.
Okay.
I love it.
Okay.
And number 2, I'd have to say elk.
Okay.
I love elk. And then after that, I'm going to go to the ruffed grouse.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
I love it.
Yeah. Little timber chicken.
Yep. A little bit overlooked, in my opinion, on quality of meat.
As far as game birds go, they're right up there, for sure. Dove, another really good game bird, but there's not much to them. What's your favorite way to eat buffalo?
Well, the way buffalo are put together is a little bit different than most other mammals, but they have their loin, their back strap is a lot shorter comparison because they have a hump on them. The hump is really good. It's got a lot of fat in it, so it's really fatty, but I'd say just the back strap barbecued over a whole like a 10-inch chunk is my favorite.
Do you like to kind of cook it hot and fast?
We usually do, yeah.
Yeah.
Keep it really rare.
I just got this thing during archery season called the Schwenk grill. Have you seen one of those?
I have it.
Dude, it's pretty cool. You know the Mr. Buddy heaters? So it's kind of like that, except the propane elements are up in the top. It's like a stainless steel box, and you put your steaks in there, and then it's got like a little elevator handle, and you lift it up, and it gets just within, however close you want to almost touching of those elements that are 1,500 degrees. And you cook them for 1 minute on each side, and it's pretty much done. If you need to cook it a little bit more, you just lower it so that it doesn't burn and wait until it hits whatever temperature you want. But one of my issues with cooking backstrap on wild game is I want that like hot and fast sear, and it's a little bit tough to do, to pull off without overcooking. Like, you almost can't get stuff hot enough. And I think this is probably the best way that I've ever found to cook backstrap. It's pretty cool.
So do you keep your backstrap in whole chunks, or do you cut individual steaks before you cook it?
Never, ever cut it into steaks before you cook it. That's what I did growing up. I'd cut butterfly steaks. It was a mistake. I didn't know any better. You leave it into whole chunks, and you cook it like that, and then you slice it before you serve it.
100%.
This is the only way.
The best way.
I will fight people who think otherwise. Yeah. No, I during the hunting school, I told those guys, it's like, you can either keep your backstrap completely whole, or you can cut it into the sections that you feel like, you and your family are going to eat that night. And they're like, well, how much is that? And I was like, well, most people eat like 4 ounces of meat. Some people eat more, some people eat less, but that's kind of what you can plan on. That's about the size of a deck of playing cards. So, hold your hand out there, like 4 fingers, like that's kind of how much one person's going to eat. So 8 fingers is 2 people. And a backstrap on a deer doesn't go very far.
No.
Yeah. I can eat half of a backstrap, like, no problem.
I was really surprised on that blacktail I shot this year. Is like, it was similar size to a whitetail, but I mean, I'm used to mule deer.
Yeah.
Where there is definitely a difference in body size.
Yeah.
I was very surprised. I think we got 4 dinners out of the entire backstrap, both sides.
Yeah. Yeah. So how big did that deer end up being?
Well, score-wise, it was, by my score, 143 3/8.
And is that big for a blacktail?
That's huge for a blacktail, especially archery. And I'll be excited to see what it scores officially.
Yeah.
It's not officially scoring yet, but
okay,
it should be right up in there. And it'll definitely be in the books.
But more than likely,
Like top 30, top 40?
Probably right in there.
Yeah. That's pretty cool, man. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Are you accepting clients for next year yet?
Usually we accept in January because we have a client list that gets first call, but if anyone ever calls, we'll pick up.
Okay. How do people get a hold of you?
My phone number or through Instagram or email anyway, and I can.
Let's give them your Instagram so you're not getting blown up by too many people on the phone.
I'll have to look. I don't honestly know. I don't do social media very much.
Okay. How about email?
It's kevinplew9@gmail.com.
Okay. And how's that spelled?
KEVINPLEW 11@gmail.com.
Okay. Alrighty. So if you want to book a hunt with young Mr. Kevin, who's going to take his worn out knees and walk you into the ground, then shoot him an email and you can get a hold of him. And those hunts are going to include deer, elk, turkey, potentially buffalo. What else?
We can do bear hunts as well.
And bear hunts as well.
Yeah.
Okay. Alrighty. Well, thanks, man. Good catching up with you.
Yep.
Yep. I hope you have a good rest of your season, and maybe we can get out and find a duck one of these days.
Yeah, that'd be good.
All right, buddy.
Thank you all very much for listening. I'm going to keep bringing you these stories from normal people just like you who have done extraordinary things. Everyone is an expert at something, and they have interesting perspectives on life and work and the environment and all of the things that we care about. I'm going to keep bringing that to you. And I want to thank you so much for making this show possible. I also want to thank Emily Bratcher for producing this show. She does a great job editing. Really appreciate her. I want to thank John Chatelain. He did the art for the Six Ranch podcast. And Celia, soon to be Harlander, she digitized that so that we can get it out there on the internet for you. Also want to thank Justin Hay for writing this original music and the beautiful whistling that you're listening to right now. You guys are awesome. Thank you so much. Please keep listening to the show. Write me a review if you feel like it, and just keep doing your thing, and we'll all learn from this together. It's been fun, and we're just getting started.